state of Michigan.
Hi there, come on in. It's December 1st. Next week is our big buck night. But this week we're going to take a look at a hunting season that's open for one more month in southern Michigan, at least in the lower peninsula. That is ruffed grouse hunting. Now, ruffed grouse are a little tougher to hunt in December, but wildlife biologist Jim Hamill has some great tips and explains about the life and times of ruffed grouse. We'll be back with that in just a moment, so you stay tuned. I'm Fred Trost. It's Thursday night, time for Michigan Outdoors. Michigan's native game bird is not the pheasant, nor is it the wild turkey. The truly native king of the woodlands is the ruffed grouse. It's been in our north woods since colonial times, in fact, before colonial times. And there's been very little progress in the domestic propagation of ruffed grouse. In the late 1970s and early 80s, Michigan wildlife biologists tried trapping grouse because other states wanted to introduce ruffed grouse to their woodlands. So we made a few deals where we'd trade grouse for some wild turkeys, for example. Now, how did these little birds do in other states? Well, not too well, we hear. These little birds are delicate and temperamental and won't live just any place. And they aren't easy to trap. A length of fence called a lead is stretched along the ground, and since a grouse would rather walk than fly, it would walk along the lead and hopefully end up in the trap. That seemed to be the only practical way to trap them, but how successful was grouse trapping? Not very. Our deal was to trade one grouse for 2 turkeys, for example. But the Michigan DNR fell short because grouse were so hard to obtain. Not only do grouse resist trapping, but they're extremely difficult to breed in captivity. There are only 1 or 2 Michigan breeders who have been able to successfully hatch and raise them in cages. And the price on a pair of these penned-raised grouse, we've heard, is about $1,000. So we have a bird here that we've tried to trap, tried to move, tried to propagate and domesticate, but it hasn't worked. This old DNR footage you're looking at is historical. The conclusion is that grouse and Mother Nature have kind of a thing going where they take care of themselves. Trapping and moving doesn't work because grouse like specific habitat, where you find young aspen and popple stands. In other words, where you find the food and the cover they like, you'll find ruffed grouse. Move 1/8 of a mile away where the habitat is not what they want, you won't find any grouse. When we hunted in Iron County with wildlife biologist Jim Hamill, he told us the cover, the little pieces of cover that would produce woodcock. And they did. He said, no grouse here, and there weren't. And he'd say, grouse here, but no woodcock, and he was right. A few places, he said, we'd find both. The moral of the story, find the cover, you find the grouse. Finding grouse before or after they're down can be a challenge even for a good grouse dog. Jim's pup searches high and low for this downed bird and finally comes up with it. But what about this December season in the lower peninsula? Does Jim Hamill think it's really worth hunting after the snow falls?
December season in lower Michigan is a really effective time to take ruffed grouse, mostly because the birds are very concentrated in the heaviest cover that you have available. Oftentimes you don't have a lot of snow to cause the birds to be snow roosted for the entire 24-hour period. And also a big advantage of hunting the birds at that time of the year is you have some of that soft mast crop that's still up, especially gray dogwoods at that time of the year. So birds are super concentrated on whatever mast crop is still available, and they can be found on the very heaviest cover that you have, including cattails, in northern region 3 and southern region 2. That's a very effective time to get very high flush rates and to be very effective on ruffed grouse. Excellent time to hunt the birds.
But a curious thing happens after the snow gets 5 or 6 inches deep. The DNR says grouse hunters stay home by the fire, and the grouse change their habits too.
Okay, if you have 8 inches of snow or so on the ground, ruffed grouse will prefer to snow roost for most of the day. And what they do is burrow into the snow, and usually enter the snow, burrow down near the ground, and then burrow off at an angle from their entry point for protection from predators. Once they are under that snow, usually it's about 20 degrees warmer there than it is right at the surface of the snow. So this is a mechanism not only to prevent them from or protect them from predation, but also to maintain their body heat. They will stay in that snow roost for almost a 24-hour period. and which coincides with sundown. Just at sundown, the birds will break from that snow roost, fly to the nearest, usually aspen tree or tree in which they're budding, and they will pick buds off those trees at a very rapid pace. In fact, for a 150-pound man to consume as much food as a ruffed grouse does in 15 minutes, he'd have to consume about 27 pounds of food. So they eat buds very rapidly during that evening period, and then just fly directly down to snow roost again for nearly 24 hours. That's a typical day cycle of a ruffed grouse during the winter period.
So they don't come out in the morning and eat then?
No, very, very seldom do they come out during the morning. It's usually a 24-hour cycle that's keyed into that snow roosting condition.
So there you go. In the snow, hunt grouse in the evenings only. That's the key. But let's talk about wild turkeys for a second. They're attaining the status of a big game trophy bird, but they've been transplanted from other states, and some strains have surprisingly taken to the northern forested areas. Now, they never used to be there. Turkeys are a lot easier to trap and move because they flock up in the winter, and biologists use the trap nets. They're big booby traps baited with corn underneath, and the whole canopy drops on the birds when the flock gathers underneath. Wild turkeys from Iowa, of all places, live in farmland. We've planted those strains in southern Michigan, and they're doing well. Now, here's that drop net in operation. Now, turkeys go for it, but ruffed grouse wouldn't. They'd be too fast. So the success of wild turkeys in recent years has been spectacular and a big surprise. And speaking of surprises, what's in store for our pheasants? Why have they disappeared? Well, who knows? There's been some indications that they might be coming back a bit, but biologists aren't banking on that. Michigan has led the nation in innovative pheasant propagation by going to China, obtaining the smaller, hardier, tougher, faster strain of Sichuan pheasants that seem to be able to survive just about any place. These new pheasants aren't ringnecks, they're blacknecks. They could revolutionize pheasant hunting in states that have trouble with pheasant populations, but right now, they're still an experiment. But not grouse. Their populations go up and down whether they're hunted or not. The habitat makes all the difference. So it looks like with ruffed grouse, Mother Nature is still pulling all the strings in Michigan outdoors.
Steve Swagger of Jackson caught this 6-pound, 6-ounce largemouth bass on a Texas-rigged black worm fishing in Jackson County. No doubt this 8-pound, 2-ounce, 29-inch dogfish gave Jeff Ply of Kalamazoo quite a fight. He caught it on a minnow fishing Gull Lake. Now here's a 9-pound, 2-ounce Saginaw Bay walleye that came through the ice on the last day of February. Tim Kochny of Midland caught it on a Clio. Richard Doan of Flint called up this 18-pound gobbler with an almost 9-inch beard while hunting in Osceola County. Here's an 11-point buck that Harold Boschers of Battle Creek took with his bow and arrow, probably right close to home in Calhoun County. Kenneth Rosenstangel of Saginaw caught this trophy pink salmon fishing with a little Clio in the Carp River in Mackinac County. Now, young Ken is quite a fishing veteran. He says he's been fishing for 9 years, and that's quite a feat for a fisherman who's only 10. So for catching this pink salmon that weighed 5 pounds, 6 ounces and was over 24 inches long, and for doing this all before his 10th birthday, let's make Kenneth Rosenstangel our Michigan Outdoors Trophy Angler of the Week. Everybody understands it when they apply for a hunter's choice permit and aren't selected. Some areas are tremendously oversubscribed and your chances of getting a permit are slim. But since the $3 application fee was added a couple of years ago, the DNR Wildlife Division has at least notified unsuccessful applicants. This year they made a decision at a high level not to notify those who weren't drawn. They reasoned that it would cost too much. It would cost $20,000 to let the unsuccessfuls know. However, that kind of reasoning is pretty short-sighted in view of the fact that every applicant spent $3 to apply and the total collected was over $1.1 million. But even worse than that is the fact that the application process for antlerless permits is the most direct contact that hunters have with the Wildlife Division. You can't blame hunters for being soured on the permit process, especially this year when 100,000 of them have spent $3 plus the cost of a stamp and didn't even get the courtesy of a reply.
Dave Ekman from Southgate says he bought a new rifle sling and a hunting knife, both of which involve leather. Having both in my gun case for some time, I opened the case recently and caught the smell of leather. What can be used to mask or neutralize the smell of leather? Well, Dave, what's the problem? You must be worried that deer will smell leather and figure out a hunter must be around wearing a knife or a gunsling. But don't worry. The smell of tanned leather does not bother deer. Your smell, which you generate by breathing and just being there, does. Now, most of the information you hear about scents and cover scents is hyped to sell products. The best scent cover is the wind blowing in the other direction. So be a skillful hunter, play the wind, and don't worry about the smell of leather.
How is it possible for a few does to grow antlers? Well, does have certain female hormones that prevent antlers from growing. If the level of those hormones is too low, small antlers may grow.
This week's recipe on Mesquite and Tangy rabbit from Betty Trigg from Owasso was a winner in our contest. And Kath, this would be good with any small game.
Oh, you could use squirrel would adapt real good to this. You got a flour, water, onion, mesquite and tangy barbecue sauce, and celery tops. Not the celery stalks, but the tops, and it does make a different taste. And a bay leaf, and you need shortening to fry it in. Look at the great pieces of meat there.
Oh, great
Oh, this
rabbit.
is a nice big rabbit. Very, very meaty. And you're just going to brown these. Now, that's just the flour and the salt and pepper mixed in. And then all you need to do is brown the pieces really good. Then you go ahead and add those to a pressure cooker.
Hold it. You're browning them in the pressure cooker.
In the pressure cooker, and then we're going to use the pressure cooker to cook the meat with. And there they are, nice and brown. You don't want to overdo it here because it is going to cook longer. And you do need the rack in the bottom of your pressure cooker because it'll hold the meat off the bottom, and the barbecue sauce won't stick to it. And add everything back in there. The bay leaf and a rabbit, and then your tangy barbecue sauce, onion, of course. And now a lot of people say to fry this first, but I wouldn't. Betty said not to, so I wouldn't either.
To fry what first?
The onion, to saute it first. A lot of people in a meat recipe will do that. And then your pressure cooker.
I wonder how Garner will rank your cooking job on this, Kath.
This rabbit was good and moist, and it was great when we first had it in the contest, but I think it's even better now. I mean, good fresh rabbit, good moist meat. Oh, this is great.
And it's nice and fresh. It's warm. Here.
Oh, I tell you, I'm hungry to boot, but this is...
Oh, it's an excellent way to fix rabbit.
It is.
Stays moist.
Now, why is this so good?
Because it's not baked. When you do anything in the pressure cooker, all the moisture stays right in.
The pressure cooker is the key to it?
Yep.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's always been the rub with rabbit, is that the doggone stuff is like bad white meat on a turkey
Dries
that's
out.
really dried out. And this, absolutely no way. It's tangy, too. That mesquite or, that
Barbecue
taste
sauce. Add
really
something
works
to it.
its way through. Great stuff.
That's why they call it
Mesquite and tangy rabbit.
Yeah.
I know, there's a darn good reason for it.
How would you like a copy of each of the award-winning fish and game recipes we feature during November and December? Next week, the big night here on Michigan Outdoors, Big Buck Night. You're going to see the biggest racks of the year, so be sure to join us for that. And if you can get outdoors this weekend, it's a great place to be. See you next week. Michigan Outdoors is brought to you statewide by the East Michigan Chevy Value Leaders, the nation's top-selling group of Chevrolet car and truck dealers, including Draper Chevrolet in Saginaw, Jim Canary Chevrolet in Millington, and Graff Chevrolet in Bay City.
Major funding for this program was provided by STRO. By joining together as partners to preserve our natural treasures, together we ensure our right to enjoy them. STRO, partners in preserving America's outdoor heritage.